Cleopatra, the last pharaoh. Part 1. Cleopatra is not only the name of 7 Egyptian rulers. Cleopatra V is undoubtedly an icon. Her name today stands for beauty, cleverness and extravagance. Hotels and beaches are named after her. She is popular as cream or eye makeup, and even as a disguise at Carnival or Halloween, as model Heidi Klum's costume showed in 2012.1. The fact that a lot has been written about such a famous woman is due to her hand. In addition, her myth and fate have impressed and inspired artists and writers since ancient times, and numerous directors have dedicated films to this character. What new can you say about such a woman? Hasn't her life already been examined by historians down to the last known corners? In fact, one should warn against discoveries that are too spectacular, as shown by the alleged tomb of Cleopatra, which Kathleen Martinez, an archaeologist from the Dominican Republic, claimed to have discovered in 2009 in the Temple of Topo, Iris Magna, west of Alexandria. Coins of the ruler and the head of a statue were cited as evidence for this attribution, although there are, of course, countless statues of pharaohs in Egyptian temples in particular, according to the Edict of Rosetta from the early 2nd century BC. In the 4th century BC, the installation of such images in the Holy of Holies was mandatory, even in every temple. However, a DPA report from 2009 already reported on the greatest discovery of the 21st century. The press release continued. According to archaeologist Kathleen Martinez, who has been studying the fate of Cleopatra for 15 years, and is involved in the excavation work, the bodies of Cleopatra and Antony could have been hidden in the temple to protect them from the victorious Romans. As the archaeologist from the Dominican Republic said, the tomb could be almost 21 meters deep beneath the temple. The grave would have to be covered and therefore intact. Kathleen Martinez assumes that Cleopatra's body was mummified, while this would not have been the case with Marcus Antonius, as he was neither Egyptian nor a king. By the way, the grave itself has not yet been found. There are also a number of assumptions contained in this short text, which we would like to explore below. Is it actually correct to assume that only Cleopatra was mummified, while Marcus Antonius was not? What was the heterogeneity of Egypt shortly before the turn of the century, where Egyptians, Greeks and Romans met? Can Cleopatra rightly be described as the queen in 3 cultures? But first it should be noted that the alleged sensation was hardly one. It's better to stick to the historians. Apart from the much-discussed cultural heterogeneity, another phenomenon of the time is already clear from the book titles. For example, representations of Egyptian history are called Ancient Egypt, History and Culture from Early Times to Cleopatra, or most recently a book by Toby Wilkinson, The Rise and Fall of Ancient Egypt, the story of a mysterious civilization from the 5th millennium BC. BC to Cleopatra. Cleopatra marks the end of Egyptian history, similar to the also very recent book by David Stuttard and Sam Muhed 31 BC. Antony, Cleopatra and the Fall of Egypt, the turning point, which according to the Christian understanding is associated with the birth of Jesus Christ, corresponds almost exactly to a turning point in Egypt, the end of the old, largely independent pharaonic empire. But we see around 30 BC. BC not only a domestic political change, this year also marked the victory of the Occident over the Orient, which still has consequences today. Arnoldo Momigliano described the significance of the Battle of Actium with the victory of the Roman troops around Octavian, the subsequent conquest of Alexandria and finally the suicides of Marcus Antonius and Cleopatra particularly vividly. The philosophizing historian will never stop meditating on Cleopatra's nose. If this nose had pleased the gods as much as it pleased Caesar and Marcus Antonius, a loose Alexandrian Gnosticism would have prevailed instead of the Christian discipline imposed by the 2 Romes, the old on the Tiber and the new on the Bosphorus. The Celts would have been allowed to continue collecting mistletoe in their forests. We would have fewer books about Queen Cleopatra and King Arthur, but more books about Tutankhamun and Alexander the Great. But a Latin-speaking Etruscologist, not a Greek-speaking Egyptologist, brought to England the fruits of the victory of Roman imperialism over the Hellenistic system. We have to face the facts. Blaise Pascal described the meaning of the pharaoh, even more briefly. If Cleopatra's nose had been shorter, the face of the whole world would have changed. Cleopatra's nose, if it had been shorter, the whole face of the land would have changed. Speaking of nose, was Cleopatra actually a top model, or did she convince Caesar and Marcus Antonius with her intellect? Did she have, as some coins suggest, a hooked nose, or was she, as Cassius Dio writes, so beautiful that she captivated all men? And what about her knowledge? She actually spoke numerous languages, including the usual Greek-Egyptian, as well as the language of the Ethiopians, Jews, Arabs, Syrians, Medes, Parthians, and even the troglodytes, as Plutarch records 20. And how should Horace's harsh judgment as a fatale monstrum be assessed?